I'll tell you, I've been to the border. I've been to the Biden cages. For 4 years, Democrats went on and on and on. The corrupt corporate media went on and on and on about kids in cages. You couldn't turn on the evening news without hearing kids in cages. What they didn't tell you is Barack Obama built those cages, and today under Joe Biden, the cages are bigger and they're more full than they were before. Mr. President, every Democrat who stood up and lamented kids in cages in the House of Representatives, Representative Ocasio-Cortez has a famous photo of her grasping her head by the kids in cages. Well, I'm going to give a simple challenge for Representative Ocasio-Cortez and for every Democrat in this body. Go see the Biden cages with your own eyes. I've seen them, the Donna tent facility with over 4,000 people, with little boys and little girls on top of each other. Just a couple of weeks ago when I was in the Rio Grande Valley, the rate of COVID positivity in the Biden cages was over 22%. And all the Democrats who talked about this, if they don't go, if they don't denounce the Biden cages, then they're telling you that they're hypocrites, that they didn't believe it when they said it, that they didn't care about it when they said it, that it was all politics. It wasn't about their kids. Why does Joe Biden refuse to go to the Rio Grande Valley? Because if he goes, the TV cameras will come with him. Why does Kamala Harris, who's supposed to be the border czar, she's supposed to be in charge of this, why won't she go to the Rio Grande Valley? Because if she went, the TV cameras would come and would show the Biden cages. And the Democrats are counting on the corrupt corporate media to suddenly say, nothing to see here. 15,000 Haitians under a bridge in Del Rio, nothing to see here. Anyone want to know what Joe Biden's favorite ice cream flavor is? That's the news. Never mind 1.2 million illegal immigrants. Never mind when I took 19 senators down to the border, we went out on the river and saw a man floating dead in the river who died trying to cross illegally. Never mind the South Texas farmers and ranchers, the moms who told me, I won't let my teenage kids go out on our ranch without being armed with a loaded firearm. Because there's so many human traffickers and narcotics traffickers that it's dangerous for them to go out on their own ranch. Never mind the South Texas farmers and ranchers who told me at round tables how tired they are of going out and finding dead bodies. You want to understand what's happening? Say there's no crisis? Come to Brooks County. I invite every Democrat here to Brooks County. Brooks County in South Texas, it's just north of the border. Brooks County, over and over and over again, they're dead bodies of illegal immigrants. The traffickers who are bringing them in, they're not nice guys. They're not humanitarians. They don't give a damn. That means if one of the illegal immigrants is a pregnant woman, is a young child, is elderly, is sick, they just abandon them. They leave them in the rough terrain, in the summer heat, and over again. The farmers and ranchers encounter dead bodies on their property where the traffickers have abandoned them. Mr. President, I ask you, is that humane? Is that compassionate, the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris policy that encourages, that puts people in harm's way and results in people dying? When we were down on the border, we saw a young girl who had been gang raped by the human traffickers who had brought her to America. The rate of sexual assault is staggering, particularly among the girls and young women. So much so that a significant percentage of young women, before they take the harrowing trip with the traffickers, will implant a birth control because they know the odds of their being sexually assaulted are so great. And I'll tell you, as I was doing the roundtables, one of the things I saw also was the colored wristbands. So the traffickers are global cartels. They're criminals. They're vicious criminals. They charge anyone, a young man, a young woman, a little boy, a little girl, thousands of dollars, anywhere from $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 to cross into the United States. By the way, do you know there's 100% operational control on the border, 100% on the southern side? Nobody crosses the border without the cartel's permission. If you do, they will kill you. Every person who crosses the border does so after paying the cartels, because you will be killed otherwise. But often when they come, they'll cross and they'll end up at a stash house. I've been to those stash houses. I've been out on the midnight patrols with the Border Patrol. You go into those stash houses, and they're colored wristbands that they put on the illegal immigrants. And the colors correspond to how many thousands of dollars they paid and how many thousands of dollars more they owe. Often when they get here, the cartels will say, "Thank you for your X thousand dollars, we want Y thousand more." Tragically, it is at those stash houses in the United States where many of the sexual assaults occur. And so these immigrants, many of whom are young children, teenage children, when they get here, the Biden administration delivers them to their final destination. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and their administration are the last mile of the human trafficking network. But for the 14, 15-year-old boy who arrives in Atlanta, who arrives in New York, who arrives in Detroit, who arrives in Nashville, many of those 14 and 15-year-old boys owe thousands of dollars to the cartels, which means they arrive in your city. You might think Georgia is not a border state, but when teenagers are arriving in Atlanta, owing thousands of dollars to the cartels, they work for the cartels. And the cartels know who their family is and where their family is, and they risk their mother or father being murdered if they don't work for the cartels to pay off the cartels. The young women have it even worse. There are teenage girls who make the decision, I want to come to America, I want to come to the promised land. We've been a beacon of hope to millions throughout our history. They don't realize they are stepping into hell on earth. When the traffickers take them and then take them to a cartel facility in whatever city they end up in, where many of those teenage girls, still owing thousands of dollars to the cartels, have to work to pay off that debt by forced prostitution. Young girls forced into a life of sex slavery because the alternative is murder at the hand of the cartels. This is happening. The fact that Joe Biden doesn't want to talk about it, the fact that Kamala Harris claims it's not happening, the fact that the corrupt corporate media ignores it, it doesn't stop the fact that hundreds of thousands of people are suffering.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to each of the nominees. Judge Cotto, I want to start with you. Is racial discrimination wrong?
Senator, our Constitution prohibits race discrimination, discrimination on the basis of race.
Okay, let me ask again, is racial discrimination wrong?
Senator, as a judge, I don't deal with issues of morality or whether something...
So you have no views on whether it's right or wrong?
Senator, because that is an issue that is frequently litigated before the courts, pursuant to Canon 3 of the Code of Conduct.
Okay, so why does the Constitution prohibit racial discrimination?
Senator, I think it's part of our Constitution and this nation's history of aiming for equal justice and treating people, regardless of any protected class status, equally and fairly.
So discriminating based on race violates, I think you just said, our Constitution's history of aiming for justice. Is that a fair characterization?
Senator, our case law, if you're talking about race discrimination under the law, yes, pursuant to Supreme Court precedent, race discrimination under the law is prohibited.
So you and I are both graduates of the Harvard Law School. We were there at the same time. I don't think we crossed
We did not.
As you know, our alma mater is currently before the Supreme Court for its longstanding practice of discriminating against Asian Americans. And many top universities across the country have vicious discrimination policies against Asian Americans. They are reminiscent of the quotas against Jews that we saw these same schools impose in the 1950s. These schools believe that Asian Americans have been too successful academically, and that if they allow students to compete based on merit, they'd have too many Asian Americans. And accordingly, Harvard and Yale and a number of other top schools in this country explicitly and brazenly discriminate against Asian Americans. Does that practice concern you?
Senator Cruz, as you know, the Supreme Court recently granted cert in the case to which I think you're referring.
Yes.
And therefore, pursuant again to Canon 3, I am
Okay, so you're going to decline to comment, so let's not talk about that case, but let's talk about what you've written. You know, I have to say I was astonished. Senator Grassley asked you about this article you wrote in law school, and your response was, well, gosh, I haven't read that. In my experience, when people are nominated to be a judge, they do some preparation. Did you not reread it in preparation, or did the Biden team tell you don't read it because you don't want to answer questions about it?
Senator, I read it, but again, the question that Senator Grassley...
Okay, good. So you read it, so let's talk about it. I've read it sitting here, and I find it stunning. Look, there is a pattern of this administration nominating political activists and radicals to the bench, and they've done it for a year. And it's highly concerning. So I'm looking at what you wrote, your words. You described, quote, the Reagan presidency represented the pinnacle of the counteroffensive launched by the guardians of the status quo. In the face of institutional resistance, activist movements redirected their focus from liberation to survival. Do you believe there was a threat to the survival of Asian American groups under President Reagan?
Senator Cruz, again, that was a law review, book review.
I'm just asking if you agree with the sentiment. You wrote it.
Senator, I don't recall.
Do you agree with it now?
What we were thinking.
Do you agree with the sentiment now? Not what you were thinking then. I'm not asking your state of mind then. I'm saying, do you agree with the words you wrote?
Senator, again, I don't know what our purpose.
I don't want your purpose then. Today, as you listen to the words you wrote, do you agree with them, or do you think I was wrong?
Senator, without the complete context.
Okay, let's read a little bit more then. You talk about the neoconservative view, and here's what you define an Asian neoconservative: as someone with an opposition to racism, so that's good, but a commitment to ending affirmative action programs. And you write, quote, the neoconservatives' narrow vision of success currently threatens to impose divisions within the Asian American community and among different ethnic groups. Emphasizing personal achievement and success as measured by the status quo, the Asian American neoconservative fails to acknowledge the shared history of oppression and then ties their individual success to the survival and liberation of all oppressed peoples. Judge Cotto, as I read this, what you're saying, and if you will permit me to use a more common vernacular, you're saying that to be sufficiently woke, an Asian American must support policies that discriminate against Asian Americans. I got to tell you, that doesn't make sense. Is my reading of what you wrote incorrect?
Senator Cruz, again, we are talking about something that I wrote when I think I was a 23-year-old
But do you agree
law
with it
student.
today? I'm not asking what you thought then. I'm saying today, as you sit here, as the Senate is considering you for a lifetime appointment as a judge, do you agree with what you wrote that Asian Americans, to be sufficiently liberated, must support discrimination against Asian Americans?
Senator, without the complete context of that particular quote that you've excised,
I read it to you.
I cannot give you whether my opinion today, whether or not I agree with what I said as a 23-year-old law student. I would have to review the entirety.
But you said you did review it before this hearing, right?
Senator,
Correct?
I reviewed it briefly. This was quite some time ago, over 25 years.
It's a very short article. It's about 6 pages.
I co-wrote it with a classmate of mine.
Senator's time has expired. Senator Rona.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.